Hi, Chair. I think we're now good to go.
Okay. So, hello, and I would like to welcome all councillors, officers and members of the public viewing on YouTube to this meeting of the Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing Policy Development and Scrutiny Panel. My name is Councillor Vic Pritchard and I am the chairman of the panel. I will now call on the names of the other members of the panel and ask them to confirm that they are present. First off then, Councillors Michelle Dockery.
Present.
Jess David.
Present.
Ruth Malloy.
Yes, present.
Lucy Hodge. I don't know if Lucy's here, is she? Now we'll move on then to Mark Roper.
Present.
Andy Waite.
Present.
Paul May.
Present.
And Liz Hardman. Liz. Liz, oh, I can see Liz. Yeah, she's present. On mute for a moment.
Sorry.
The panel also have three co-opted members, and they are David Williams, Chris Batten, and Kevin Burnett. Can you confirm that we have a full attendance of those individuals? Kevin, you're here.
I'm here, thank you.
Chris is here. I can see Chris is here, yes. David Williams.
David's not with us today, Chair, no.
Right, okay. Now then, can I remind members and officers to keep background noise to a minimum, to only speak one person at a time and not to speak over others. Please mute your microphones when not speaking and then unmute when I invite you to speak. Please indicate that if you wish to speak by using the chat facility on Zoom by typing MIS, may I speak, and I will call you to speak in turn. If a member of the panel has to leave the meeting, then please draw my attention to this by using the chat facility. If you subsequently return to the meeting, then please also draw my attention to this in the same way. Members should also inform me if they lose connection and miss any part of the meeting, as this may result in them not being able to vote on anything they did not hear in full. Should the panel need to take a vote in order to expedite this result, I will assume a majority position. So if you wish to abstain or vote against, please indicate this on the chat when moving to the vote. Are there any questions? I don't see any indication of any questions, so we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda and take apologies for absence and substitutions.
Just the one, Chair, as indicated a moment ago, just David Williams, one of our co-opted members.
Fine, thank you. Going on to item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, there don't appear to be. No,
Chairman, can I register? I'm a chairman.
Yes.
Sorry.
Paul, Councillor May.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm a non-executive director on the board of Sirona. To the care homes coming back to the council in one of the reports. So just to flag that up, please. I know I do it on a regular basis, but I like to keep informing people. Thank you.
Fine, thank you, Paul. So moving on to item 4, urgent business agreed by the chair. There is none. Item 5, public councillor statements and questions. There are none. So item 6, the minutes of the 15th of September 2020, and they've been circulated, and can I confirm these as a true and accurate record? Do I have the support of the panel?
Vic, are you going to put that as a caveat to say that subject to the conversation already had, or subject to matters arising being dealt with, or?
Yes, do that as subject to matters arising dealt with.
Thank you.
So then we move on to item 7, and it's the Baines.
Can I abstain on that one, Chairman, as I wasn't present?
Yeah, that's fine, certainly.
Thank you.
So we're moving on to item 7, the Baines Community Safety and Safeguarding Partnership Annual Report. And if I can invite Kirsty Webb and Sean Walker McAllister, who's the Baines CSSP Independent Chair, to present the report. So down to you, Sean, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pritchard, and thank you for inviting me to present the annual report to this meeting. May I draw members' attention to the fact that this is the annual report for 2019-2020, ending at the end of March this year. And this partnership has been officially launched since September of 2020. So the annual report actually reports the safeguarding arrangements for children and adults and the community safety arrangements for the council for the previous 6 months, as well as for the current arrangements under the new panel. So members will be aware that Bath and North East Somerset Council, together with partners, took a decision to merge all the formal statutory arrangements, and the reasons for that are set out in the covering report, which has been drafted by Kirsty. This annual report, I have a statutory requirement to present it to the Health and Wellbeing Board, and that's already taken place, and also a statutory requirement to consult with Healthwatch prior to that presentation. Subsequent to that presentation, we've actually had feedback from Healthwatch to say that they endorse everything in the report and the efforts that have been made to bring together the governance of very complex arrangements for safeguarding adults and children and community safety, and work with partners to ensure that we have the right information being presented that enables appropriate assurance and good governance of safeguarding and community safety in the council. The report is a 55-page report, much longer than the annual reports I'm used to presenting. I have experience as a chair of safeguarding adult reports in other local authorities that I'm no longer chair, and 2 that I currently also chair. I like to present a report that's accessible and informative, and I think in the next year, when I'm presenting a report that's from the whole of the year of my period of office, we will work to make sure that we make it even more accessible. However, I'm pleased that we've managed to bring all the information together from very complex arrangements, and those are set out before you. They include our achievements, our strategic plans, our priorities for this year. It's important that we report, and indeed another statutory requirement, that we report on case reviews, on serious case reviews known as child practice reviews in the children's world and safeguarding adults reviews in the adults world, and that we also inform you of the work of the subgroups and the achievements of the individual partners. I'll leave it to that for my presentation, because I'll assume everybody's had the opportunity to read the report, and I'll be really happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Liz, you have a question?
I do. Sean, thank you very much for your report. It's very extensive and comprehensive, and looking at the trends, they look like they're going in the right direction. Now, my question may be a bit too early, but I recognise the Adult Safeguarding Board and the Children's Safeguarding Board have been merged, and obviously there were concerns about how this would work out. And I know it's only been in place for a while, but my question is, and I think I've sent it to you, is what are the strengths and weaknesses of the new arrangements? And is this new way of working better at safeguarding children and adults in our area?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I hadn't seen it in advance, and it may be that Leslie Hutchinson may also want to respond to that. But from my perspective, as your independent chair, I think that the strengths are that there is a much better dialogue, a much better interface around the whole Think Family agenda in terms of protecting children and protecting vulnerable adults from harm, abuse and neglect. And in particular, one of the issues that I would like to highlight is the issues of children in need and children with disabilities who transition into adult services at the age of 18, and how we can ensure that through governance that covers both areas, we can better provide assurance and direction in working with our partners to ensure that there's not a cliff face drop off at 18. So my experience both in practice, I was a former director of adult social services, working with children's social services colleagues, is that a lot of work goes on to make sure that that doesn't happen. I work very closely with Mary Kearney-Knowles and with Leslie Hutchinson in bringing together those concerns. And one of the positive benefits as well has been that I've been approached by the University of East Anglia, one of the professors there and a leader on the social work course, to contribute to an article, that a national article around how the decisions that Bath and North East Somerset have made will contribute to better assurance and better governance over that period of transition. So we're starting work on that as we speak, and we hope to be able to have a draft of that article in the new year, ready for publishing in the Journal of Social Work. In terms of the weaknesses, I would say that there's not necessarily a weakness because it's acknowledged. There's a huge agenda. There was a huge agenda with the Children's Safeguarding Board and a huge agenda with the Adult Safeguarding Board. But I think that it's been acknowledged, and therefore the strategic plans have pulled together all the information from the previous governance arrangements and put them into our strategic plan for this year. And we're beginning now to hone down where there might be repetition, and it is definitely a more efficient way of working. Our partners often cover across the whole former Avon area, and so have to attend many children's and adult safeguarding board. Bristol has similar arrangements to Bath and North East Somerset. And there's a merger of adults and children in other areas, but not community safety. And I think it enables people to have better use of their time and be more able to effectively contribute as partners to the arrangements. One of the it's not a weakness, it's an opportunity, I think, and that is the number of subgroups that we have to the partnership, which have very committed individuals working with them. And one of the things that I've done since I've been actively working in post since December has been to attend all of the subgroups to make sure that I fully understand the depth and breadth of the work that's going on there, and also have a good grip for when we bring reports and information to the operational group, which I chair, and to the executive group, to make sure that we've got the right information coming and we're making decisions at the appropriate strategic level. So all in all, I feel very positive about it. My other experience of chairing safeguarding boards has been adults, and I've always worked very closely with the chairs of children's safeguarding boards. And I think this makes absolute common sense, and we'll see how it plays out in the next year, as you so rightly put in the beginning.
Fine, thank you. Andy.
Hello, Sean. Thank you for a very detailed report. And I was slightly concerned about the first thing you said was, well, I'm going to shorten it for next year. I'm slightly concerned about that because I love to look through figures in the tables, because I get a lot. I'm not a particularly linguistic person, as you can tell by my stumbling over words and making a fool of myself. But basically, I'd like to ask a question about the table on page 50 of our report and page 24 of yours. It's a table which relates to concerns raised for particular adults. And my question is, why have you got the age ranges as you have? Just to be clear, from you tend to chuck it into decades. So you've got 65 to 74, 75 to 84, 85 to 94. That's great. I love that, because it's very clear I imagine the sort of issues that might arrange for those sort of age groups. And I'm guessing that the reason why the 85 to 94 age group is rising is simply because the 85 to 94 age group is rising in terms of numbers of people that are still alive at that time. But my question concerns the 18 to 64 group, which is not 10 years, it's actually 46 years. And so it covers a massive range, including the range of special, the sort of looked after chunk, which is sort of 18 to 24-ish, in amongst all that lots. And it just occurs to me that it would make more sense if that particular group, which is the biggest bar chart of all of them, could be broken into 2 or 3 sections. So that's my question.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. It's really helpful. In relation to next year's report, I would be thinking about reducing the length of the report, but making sure we've just launched our website for the partnership, and making sure that all the background information and a lot of the detailed statistics that lie behind this would be included on our website. So it's not about hiding information. Our remit is to be open and transparent, but it's to make the report accessible not only to members and to people who are professionally involved, but also members of the public as well, which I think is really important in ensuring that we raise the profile of safeguarding and actually what it means to citizens and to members of the public. But it's helpful to be able to explain that. In relation to the comparator age groups, they're the age groups that, in my experience, we've always tend to work with, for example, in adult social care. And I think that the point you make about breaking it into smaller groups is quite useful. 18 to 64 is normally described as adults of working age, although some people work to a lot younger than 64, and some people continue working to a lot older than 64. But it helps define how services are often provided within the statutory services and as set out within the legislation. What I would like to do is have a look at that 18 to 64-year bracket, as 4-year-old bracket, and break it down into mental health, into adults with learning disabilities, into other groups that might be quite helpful in enabling us to gain and the public to gain an improved understanding in some of the work that we're doing. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Partly. I mean, I think my main point is that the sort of reasons why a level of concern might be raised for an adult would differ vastly from an 18-year-old to a 64-year-old, whereas the other categories, I'm not saying they're all the same, but I'm saying you can sort of understand what the issues might be without actually knowing what the issues are. So as a sort of summary, to have a great chunk of age I mean, it's very difficult given the fact there are so many in that age group. I mean, it's very difficult to actually interpret what that means. That's my point.
So we would also break it down in looking at safeguarding concerns that are raised and inquiries that follow and where they do follow in relation to specific issues, like, for example, self-neglect or abuse by another person, or abuse or neglect that takes place in care homes and care facilities. So those are the sorts of things as safeguarding board chairs that we look at in order to try and understand any trends, understand the work that's going on in a given local authority boundary area, and be able to have the discussions with partners to agree how resources might be targeted to prevent where there are particular high levels of abuse occurring. The role of the Safeguarding Board is primarily about prevention, not just reporting what happens. And so understanding what happens enables us to then target and talk to our partners about how resources are targeted within their organisations, either working together or working with others. there have been some, Leslie has circulated some prepared responses, I gather. She's just emailed and copied me into an email. I don't know whether Leslie would like to come in at this point to clarify further.
No, actually, no, Sian, you articulated clearly, I think, what the situation is in terms of the data returns. This is a standard format for age in terms of the way that we have to report back to the NHS digital. I think your point is right, though, Andy. I think it's absolutely right, and I think we need to be breaking it down further to look at the learning, and it's certainly something that we can do, and we should put some local effort into. I think, as Sian has said, you couldn't possibly put it all of it into a document of this size, but I think if you want us, you can make a request that we look at that in some detail and bring it back to a further panel. Because I think the point is right in terms of breaking down that age group. But from a statutory return, we put them in on that. We have to we fill in our submissions in that way.
So may I also add that the statutory adult safeguarding return, known as the SAC data, which goes to the Department of Health data, digital data collection, what we've noticed in the last 5 years since Safeguarding Adults came on the statute book has been that those returns vary vastly up and down the country and across local authorities, because the regulations aren't entirely clear around the data that should be collected and how it should be collected. And you're comparing apples and pears, and it's been quite difficult for safeguarding chairs, and I chair the Southwest group of safeguarding chairs, and I work nationally with other chairs, how we make comparisons and how we work on that data. So I was asked by the Local Government Association to work with others to lead nationally on preparing some guidance around safeguarding concerns and how we get that improved. That guidance was published yesterday, and I received my email with it yesterday. I think it was in the last few days, and that guidance is going out to all partners to ensure that so police, NHS, voluntary and community sector, everyone who's involved in reporting concerns around safeguarding adults, and for those professionals who are receiving those concerns on the front line, to better understand what should be reported as a concern and how that should be dealt with, and what proceeds to an inquiry, in the hope, and we worked with NHS Digital on this as well. One of their senior officers was a part and parcel of our workshop and helped us co-produce the guidance report that was delivered. And we hope that in the next few years we'll be much better able nationally to compare the data in the way that children's data, which has been gathered and collected for far longer, is able to compare and contrast.
Sian, you say that the regulation is not clear and it interprets differently in different parts of the country, and you're suggesting that it's been honed to be a little bit more specific now. Are we able to react in a manner that we're comfortable with and that would satisfy ourselves, or we can't go outside the boundaries of regulation?
Okay, so what's not been clear has been the guidance, the operational guidance around the Care Act in terms of the gathering of data, and that's been recognised by local councils and fed through to the Local Government Association, who have commissioned this piece of work to make it much clearer. So last year, it's section 42(1) of the Care Act, to get into detail. Last year, there was some work done on section 42(2), which is where safeguarding concerns are converted to safeguarding inquiries. And they were going to take the whole of section 42, but realised it was too big an ask to do it in one piece of work. So then I was asked to follow through this year with a number of other colleagues around consulting and making changes. So it's as with any new piece of legislation, there are different interpretations, and it's often difficult in terms of how those are interpreted locally and regionally and nationally. So the work's been done. I feel very confident that we'll have much better data to compare. And this is in relation to safeguarding adults only, not safeguarding children. And I think we've got a useful way forward. And I'm hoping, I'm happy to have have a discussion with members separate to the committee to go through some of the trials and tribulations of how we interpret data and work on that. But I'm confident that by next year we'll be in a much better position and be able to clarify and explain how we get that data, following up with the other councillors. I can't see your full name, sorry, on my screen. And the councillors' comment about the data and what we have in our annual report this year.
Okay, so Kevin.
Thank you. Yes, thank you again. Bewildered a little bit by the huge amount in the report, but thank you. I've got 4 points which may be very minor. I'm sure you'll probably be able to answer them very quickly. The first one is a bit of an old chestnut with schools regarding, in the Avon area, Operation Encompass. And I was looking at the scopes for each group, and on page 14 of your report, where the domestic abuse subgroup is there wasn't any mention of it as such, and now it's become a sort of a national initiative. It would be lovely to see that included in the subgroup as one of their sort of ways that they're working towards and hoping to achieve, particularly having had COVID and lockdowns, increased domestic abuse, sadly, and one of those key information feeders to school. The second thing I was going to ask you was about food poverty and whether that comes into which sort of subgroup would be looking after that. Third quick one was about escalation concerns. Various schools have commented to me that now we have multi-academy trusts, as well as just a very few maintained schools now. The actual clear pathway for school leaders to escalate child protection concerns could be a little bit woolly, and whether you have anything direct now or guidance for them of how to escalate a concern. And the last comments, please, was on page 12 of your report, which said that looking at case reviews, the first paragraph, the last sentence, the learning prompted consideration of what to do when services are offered but not accepted. Could we have a clarification of what you do when services are offered and not accepted?
Okay, thank you. So the first question in relation to Operation Encompass and the issues particularly in respect of the increase in domestic violence during the lockdown period that we all realised. What the data's shown us, and we've got a domestic abuse subgroup of the partnership, what the data has shown us is that whilst there have been increased contact with those organisations that provide domestic abuse services and support, there hasn't been an increase in terms of adult safeguarding, and the impact on children's safeguarding in terms of domestic violence is well known. So those issues very much form part and parcel of the work of the Domestic Abuse Partnership, which sits as one of our subgroups, and where they work very closely with schools in ensuring that any change in the data and any change in the way we need to target and look at our services around domestic abuse can be picked up. So that's in relation to that question. In relation to food poverty, we have an early help and intervention subgroup, and that met yesterday. Actually, I attended the last part of that meeting yesterday, and that's chaired by Fiona Finley, one of the local doctors, and it very much is on the agenda of that group and picks up on those issues and the impact that may have on safeguarding, and therefore because of our role around prevention, what needs to happen both in the voluntary and community sector and in the statutory services around highlighting where there may be food poverty and directing people to appropriate resources to ensure that they have adequate food and nutrition and everything that they need. In relation to escalating concerns and the change with the multi-academy trusts, Question I'll answer in two parts. So we have an escalation protocol, which we're currently reviewing anyway, around where we picked up that, not in schools necessarily, but there may be a bit of confusion around the escalation protocol, which was written a little while ago, and we're meeting in November to revise that and represent that to the executive. I think in December. It may be, if we haven't yet finished, that task and finish group hasn't finished, it might be the following meeting. In relation to the work around multi-academy trusts and schools and raising concerns around child protection, we had a child protection forum this week where all the schools, well, we had 68 people participating, not all the schools were there. We have a head teacher who leads for all schools on the operational subgroup, so she feeds out into all the schools as well. And we had a number of speakers talking about how to report child protection concerns, a whole number of issues around that are relevant to schools and safeguarding and protecting children. And the feedback from that session yesterday was it's been one of the best that they've had so far because of the range of presenters. And this was from head teachers themselves, because of the range of presenters and the information given. So I feel very positive about our links with schools. We also had a presentation by one of Mary Kearney Knowles' staff in relation to the restructure of children's services and the restructure of the way they deliver their operational services and the duty and contact teams that they now have, who are able to, because of their role, much better be available for contact and triage and onward triage, to have one person who then deals with a safeguarding, a child protection inquiry right the way through to conclusion. So children's services in Baines have responded to those issues. They've consulted widely on the way they have proposed restructuring their services, and I'm confident as the independent safeguarding chair that those arrangements will enable us to have a much more smooth process for raising child protection concerns. The officer, Lee Zweig, who presented that yesterday, is reviewing the new structure over the next year. We will be taking feedback from the subgroups of the Safeguarding Partnership and from the executive, and we'll feed into that. And if there are any changes that need to be made, they will be made speedily within the next year as that new structure is reviewed. On page 12, I'm just going to click into it now. The learning prompted consideration of what to do when services are offered and not accepted. That's an issue that cuts across safeguarding adults and children. And in this particular issue, my recollection, I shall Leslie will step in if it's not, if I'm recalling the wrong one, was a case around a mother reporting some concerns, and that was this the case where the baby died in hospital, Leslie? May I just ask you to just double check?
It's certainly a case that sadly involved a child death.
Yeah, okay, so thank you. And where the mother, prior to, I mean, the death wasn't determined, there was no police prosecution, it wasn't determined to be, you know, following up in terms of a crime having been committed or neglect or anything like that. But the mother had been offered services when she'd contacted agencies prior to the death of the baby, and she hadn't taken them up. Now, there's no statutory duty to force people to take up services when they don't need to, but all safeguarding boards up and down the country, whether they be adults or children, are talking about how we work with services, because we're not delivering the services, we're just as a partnership seeking assurance, but how we get assurance from services that they are flexible enough to be able to look at different ways in to offer services to individuals who might be offered a way forward. Often known as contextual safeguarding, it's about finding the right person who's got the right relationship with the family member to be able to work with them to enable them to avail services. In safeguarding adults, the issue is often around mental capacity and using the Mental Capacity Act to test out whether adults have the capacity to be able to refuse services, and if they don't, organisations still have a right to a duty to ensure that their right to life is protected, and there will be all sorts of other ways offered in relation to enabling adults to get some access to support where they have previously refused. It's a complicated area. It's something that we will continue to look at as a partnership, and I'll be happy through the process of this next year to come back if members have got particular interest.
Fine, thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to congratulate you, Chair, on the presentation of this report. It's a horrendously complicated marketplace, and great credit to the officers who've produced this report for you to present today. Just one very minor point on that. The abbreviations, if these reports are being read by us poor ignorant councillors, there's lots of abbreviations in there, and I think there might be some sense sometimes in actually not having quite so many technical abbreviations. That's just a minor point. Can I draw your attention or ask you a question about page 53 in the report, no, 54, I think, about the funding. As I understood it, the funding was supposed to be equal between the CCG, the council and the police, but the indication is with the police figures, their contributions are nowhere near equal to the local authority and the CCG. Is this something that is being taken up moving forward? The other point I wanted to make was around the schools. You answered that Kevin's question, I think, very effectively, and very effectively from a local authority point of view. But you've answered it as the organisations, as opposed to, we've had one or two examples in Bath and North East Somerset where things have gone on in schools and the schools haven't reported it, but there have been no means of communications. Now, most of our schools are in academies of us actually knowing about what's happening in a school in terms of the children. And the other thing was, I don't know whether I've missed it in the report, about the wider agenda, the cross-boundary issues, and in particular with Baines CCG looking towards Swindon, are we looking towards the BNSSG dimension as well? So I'm sorry, that's a very complex set of questions.
Okay,
I'm sure you know all the answers.
Well, I'll try. So in terms of abbreviations and acronyms, I absolutely am with you on that. And it's an issue that I've picked up. I hate them. Sometimes I don't understand it, and sometimes I do. But even when I do, and Leslie will, in meetings, I will step up and say, could you tell me what that is, please? To kind of give permission for everyone to ask that question. So we won't have any in next year's annual report, but where we do need them, they'll be defined first of all. And I've asked for a glossary to go on the back of this annual report when it's published on the website. So there will be a glossary explaining those. I equally require any serious case review reports. I hate it when they, and I'm all over those, absolutely into the detail of them, as I should be, as is my statutory role. And I hate it when acronyms and abbreviations or professional language is used. Now, I can use professional language like anyone else, because that's my training is as a social worker, and 43 years practice later, I can really use it, but I don't like it because what I like doing about this role is being accessible to the public. And it's not about what different councillors understand it primarily, although that's important. It's about accessibility to the public. So I'm passionate about that, as you can see, and I'm with you. In terms of funding, it's my experience that the police never fund to the level that the CCGs and adult social care do. Now, I wasn't around when discussions were with the Avon and Somerset police some time ago, although we have had budget discussions in the executive, and we'll be all right for this year because we had an underspend from last year. But it is a serious issue around how we're going to fund the partnership in the future. And we are going to be having discussions around how more income can be generated, because when we weren't able, because of COVID, to have generated as much income from training as we'd hoped, which would have helped us to balance and probably brought in a bit more this year. So the main cost of the partnership is around the team, and it's a very small team that sits behind. It's Kirsty Webb as the business manager, an administrative assistant, and 2 days a month from me, and Leslie and Mary in their statutory roles support those with more time, I would say, than perhaps other members from all the strategic partners. But it is an issue that we need to pick up. In terms of schools and issues that have come up from schools, I'm unaware of those, because I wouldn't be aware of the detail that you have as an elected member. But I would just say that schools have a statutory duty to report any adult protection concerns. We've just had what they call a Section 175 audit, which is yes, it is 175, isn't it, Leslie? Yeah, nodding. Which is an audit of schools in relation to their safeguarding arrangements. Initially, we thought we didn't have as many back as we had. We did a follow through. I was about to use my statutory duty ability as a chair to enforce responses to those. We have them all in, and we feel confident that schools do understand their statutory duty around reporting on child protection arrangements. But we don't just rely on that. We ensure that there's adequate schools representation, information goes back to schools. The Child Protection Forum, which was twice a year, is now going to be quarterly. So it will encourage and have lots of speakers, will encourage more participation in all matters safeguarding. In relation to wider boundary issues, so there is the Avon and Somerset strategic partnership around safeguarding for children's services primarily. It doesn't really cover adult social care. I've asked Mike before he left if it could perhaps be put to that partnership, whether one of the the independent chairs of safeguarding from the Avon and Somerset area could sit on that partnership. So we've got a good link as far as chairs are concerned. In relation to links across with Swindon and Wiltshire, from a chair's perspective, I have those links because I chair the Southwest independent safeguarding chairs. Now this is for adults, but a couple of us also chair children's as well, network. And so we have good relationships and pick up issues with each other's and the directors of adult social services and children's social services in our area. So we have good strategic links across the piece, and there's also national and regional networks, other networks in relation to children's safeguarding as well. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, I saw Leslie grin when I made one or two of the comments, because I've raised these before, and I'll keep on pushing away. Thank you very much. A really good set of answers. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor May. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Jess.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I wanted to ask about the Baines Hate Crime Review panel, which is on page 9, I think, of the document. And it says that it was a priority identified in the previous year. I just wanted to ask what the role of the panel was, whether it looks at specific cases. And the real issue I wanted to know is the involvement of the police, and whether that panel is able to help direct police resource where there are specific ongoing cases of hate crime, particularly in terms of racial abuse.
Okay, thank you. A really great question. I'm not aware of everything that's gone on in the previous year before I joined, but in respect of community safety, we're very much looking at hate crime and the resources that are in place to both prevent but also to work with people who have been victims of hate crime, and where appropriate, that the benefits of having community safety with adult and children's safeguarding is that we can also look at hate crime in relation to safeguarding elements as well when we've undertaken either inquiries or safeguarding adult reviews or child practice reviews. So it's really, really important. We had a presenter from SARI, and that acronym it changed. It was against racial incidents. It's now around Stand Against Racism and Inequality, I think is the new translation of the acronym. So they presented at the Child Protection Forum, and they work very closely with schools and with other organisations across Baines, and alongside the police, in ensuring that people are aware of the importance of recognising, reporting and dealing with any racist incidents that may occur, or any hate crime incidents that occur, not just about racism but about other hate crime to people who may suffer the output of hate crime. So we take on board those issues, and those come through the community safety element of our partnership. And we have an exploitation subgroup that would take account of those issues. We have a vulnerable communities subgroup, which also picks up on those issues. And although we have lots of subgroups to the main partnership, the beauty of them is that they work in a kind of matrix fashion, if I may use that piece of terminology. So there will be issues of crossover between vulnerable communities and the exploitation subgroup, and both chairs will share their agendas and make sure that the appropriate person is picking up on investigating in more detail issues that need to be presented through to the operational board and the executive. I think that's all I can say for now, but please come back with some follow-up if I haven't answered your question fully.
Thank you. Kevin, did you want to come back?
Sorry, thank you very much. Sean, sorry, just one further point, when you were listening to the explanation of another question about services offered and things, how do you get, or how regularly do you get feedback from schools, not in terms of what they're doing statutorily, which I'm sure they're doing that really well, but in terms of as a consumer of the child protection referral process, and what they're finding in terms of how they get response and all those sort of issues? How do you get that feedback, and is that collected fairly regularly or under a particular subgroup?
So feedback from anyone who makes a safeguarding concern or raises a child protection inquiry is important in terms of how they feel that inquiry has been dealt with. And the restructure of children's services, when I've listened to several explanations of it now, shows that they very much take account of what schools are saying in terms of feedback. The Child Protection Forum has enabled that feedback to come to officers, and it was only the day before, was it yesterday or the day before, that one of the issues raised is, will you please let us know when we've raised a safeguarding or child protection concern, can you about a child, and you're doing something about it, or when circumstances change for a child where we know that a child in need or a child has concerns, can you please let us know as a matter of course, because we are the people in regular contact with that child and we need to know their circumstances in order to be able to support them appropriately in their school life. And that was raised and responded to very positively. So they're only general, they were general comments around the issues, but if anyone has any specific comments, they will raise it with the representative who sits on the operational group. And when we're back to normal working, one of the things that I will be doing is going out and about and around into services to get an understanding of some of the issues, because I think that's part and parcel of the role of a safeguarding chair, for people to understand what she or he does, and to explain the importance of the partnership and enable staff who are dealing with issues on the front line to understand how everything that they're doing feeds into governance that actually makes a difference in terms of the way things are working. So I'm not doing that at the moment, obviously, but that's something that I will be doing when time allows, when we can get back to some normal, hopefully in 2021, some normal way of working.
Could I
Thank
just
you.
come in there, Sian? Is that okay?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah,
in terms,
fine.
just to add on to that, there is an escalation process which Sian referred to earlier, and when a school doesn't feel like it's being responded to, or when a school feels like the support that's being offered through children's services aren't responding in the right way, they do follow the escalation protocol. So I've had not many, a handful, but they will have been escalated up via myself or other members of the team to deal with if they felt that their voice hasn't been heard at an earlier time. So there is that part of the process as well that does take place. But Sian's right, it does get raised very generally at the child protection forums, and we feed that back. But then if it needs to be formally escalated, that does happen as well. And the bit on the hate crime question about do the cases get reviewed and do the police take action, or do we deploy action as a case of that when we do look at those cases? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Each case that goes to that review panel, it does then lead to, if needed, some deployment of staff to help support the person.
Thank you, Leslie.
Sorry, can I just come back on one quick
Yes,
thing?
certainly.
Thank you. Sian, is it possible, please, to have a feedback on what has happened about knowing about the changes and how schools get that information back, and what's being done about that at a future date, please?
Yes, I'm sure we can pick up on that. What I would suggest is that we pick up on that in terms of reporting back on the success of the child protection forums and some of the general issues that are raised. Would that be acceptable?
Thank you very much.
Okay, Sian, on the redefined safeguarding arrangements that you have now into one board, where you move on to your training facilities and the interagency training places, you're quite generous on the number of places available, but it doesn't match how many of those places have been booked and attended. It seems to be quite a significant shortfall. Are you too generous in the places available initially?
I'll have to pick. I can't answer that directly because it's down to some of the operational detail, but it's something I'll pick up with Leslie, who at the moment chairs the training and development subgroup, and with Jen, who organises the training around safeguarding and community safety for the partnership. So I will pick that up. The issue for us at the moment has been that training has gone from training in reality to training virtually, and we've lost our income base on that. So that all of the training is being reviewed in terms of how it can be delivered and how we can get it more effectively funded in the future. And I think the issue around training, I used to be a training and development officer myself in social care very many years ago in London. Worked for a local authority there, and that people in training need to kind of regularly review, evaluate after every course to actually determine if it's meeting the needs and we've got the right audience. And that's one of the things from a strategic perspective that the partnership's interested in, to ensure that we're not wasting any resources, that we're targeting resources at where they need to be.
Fine, thanks. Paul, you wanted to come back.
Yes, Sian, can I just ask you around the schools? I'm sorry about the dogs barking. They always bark as you just come in. I know the schools that often complain about the social care side of the equation are often the ones that aren't necessarily doing the job as well as they could. And there's bound to be variations between schools. My question really is, how can we get the voice of the child listened to? Because I think the great risk is the organisations are there, but the voice of the child may not be being heard in the schools where it's not working as well as it could. And I'm not asking for an answer. If you could just take that on board for me, because I've been pushing it for quite a while, and I'd really like to hope that next year we might have a better answer for that. Thank you.
I'd just briefly respond to say that the voice of the child is absolutely crucial to the whole ethos of the partnership. We worked with the Youth Parliament were involved in recruiting me to this post. We subsequently had presentations by the Youth Parliament to operational and executive groups, and we're working, we use them and work with them to consult on how we do things whenever any changes are made. So it's absolutely important, and we can make sure that the voice of the child and the voice of the young person is absolutely part and parcel of our annual report for next year.
Kevin, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, very quickly, thanks, Vic. First of all, you can never be too generous, Vic. I always think that. I'd like to thank Sean. Obviously, the size of this brief, everyone on the panel can see, is absolutely massive. Huge amount of work has gone into this. So I'd like to thank you and your team for that. On behalf of the panel, if there was something you would like this panel to focus on, because their job is to scrutinise children's services and adult services. So if there's an area you would like this panel to shine some light on and focus on specifically, what would that topic be, Sean?
Ooh.
Yeah, you don't have to answer that one now, but if you could give the
I feel a bit on the spot with that question, to be honest with you, Councillor Guy. But what I'd like to do is give that some thought and welcome that request, because I think it's a really important one. As we one of the things that I am doing is reviewing the operational group and how that works, because it's this really huge group, and sometimes we don't get. I think we could do with more opportunity to debate some meaty issues within that group that we don't, because there's so many people participating. So I'm currently looking at reviewing the operational group and ensuring that we've got great subgroups, ensuring that everybody on the operational group is able to be active in subgroups so they can get their voice heard there. And that perhaps one of the options might be that only the chairs of all the subgroups go into the operational group, because it will enable us to have a better grip of specific issues where there are concerns. So what I would like is when I review the effective functioning of the operational group, and we deliver perhaps a new way of working, to look at the issues which come up then, because I think we'll hone in more on specific issues, and use your very helpful offer to have that considered by a scrutiny panel as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. It's one of the things I found when I chaired a scrutiny board, is that you just have loads of reports that come to these scrutiny panels, and all the panel members do, they get overwhelmed with just loads of data. But if there's a particular topic the panel members can get their teeth into and really pull apart and look at in detail, I'm sure they'd really enjoy doing that. And
I'd really welcome that as well.
I don't think they're doing a bad job this morning or this afternoon, wherever we are. I'm going to take the final speaker now, and it's going to be Ruth.
Right. Thank you, and thank you for this report, which is very long and detailed. I just wanted to ask you a bit more about on page 10. It's under priority 2. You mentioned 2 of the campaigns that I know have been going on for a while. Got Your Back about river safety, and the other one, #NeverOK, about bullying in schools and universities and elsewhere. And you were saying about the training and so on, and working with in partnership with others, and I think those 2 are so important, and especially the Got Your Back one, thinking about all the recent tragic deaths to add to the very long list, unfortunately. And so I'd be interested to know how far those resources are shared, and who's in. I know the universities are involved very much in the partnerships, but how far or to what extent are the schools involved? Because it is a really important safeguarding issue, isn't it, for everybody? So
absolutely it is. I can't give you a direct answer in terms of how far the schools are, other than to say that I know the schools are involved in those campaigns, and I would be happy to come back to you with a more detailed answer on that, Councillor Malloy. The colleges and universities, as well as the schools, have a place on the operational board, and one of the things we need to look at in how we reorganise the operational board for the partnership is to make sure that that very proactive involvement continues. Interestingly, on my other boards elsewhere, and I chair the Safeguarding Adult boards in Lambeth and in Devon, we don't have universities and colleges despite trying to get them on the board. And I think in Baines, it's a credit to the way partnership has evolved across the local authority area, that the colleges are as involved as they are. Clearly, schools are involved in children's safeguarding in those other areas, but I don't have responsibility for them. So if I can pick up on that, I will also raise it at the next operational board and come back to you. It might be a couple of months to tie in with the board meetings, and if you would accept that, I'd be happy to do that.
Yes, no, that would be great, because they're both ongoing worries, aren't they? Very much. Thank you.
So, Sean, you've been asked to look at a breakdown of the age group within adults. We're going to be quite interested on how you interpret forthcoming data. But this is the first paper we've received since there's been combined responsibilities for community safety. As with the Health Watch, I think we can endorse this as a very encouraging paper. I don't know if there's any panel members that they'd be comfortable accepting it in that guise now going forward. No dissent. So it's those 2 points that we need, that we would like some feedback on, but I think that would this come through in the next report? So it's an annual report. So we note it, but we are invited to raise any queries, which, as I say, that's the breakdown, further breakdown of the adult age group, and the interpretation of data, how you actually go about that. Those are two items I've picked up through the debate.
So that will be in the next report. I will get back to Councillor Ruth Malloy separately around the specific queries she raised after the next round of operational and executive meetings. So I think they're December, Ruth. So if you can acknowledge that it won't be till then that I'll respond. And for the other data, it'll be the annual report next year, which you should receive around this time next year. However, I would say that if any, we've got 2 members, 3 elected members actually on the partnership, and if anybody has any queries to go through those elected members, and also if Leslie doesn't mind, if any queries could be passed to me through Leslie, I'd be happy to respond at any time to any queries that councillors may have in relation to community safety, adult or children's safeguarding.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for making yourself accessible before we gain the next report. So are the panel members comfortable with that as taken as our recommendations? Fine, I see nodding heads. So thank you very much, Sean. And we'll move on to item 8, where we have the Children's Services Annual Complaints and Feedback Reports. And if I can invite Sarah Watts to present the report. Down to you, Sarah, please. Thank you. Sarah, you're on mute. We're not hearing you, Sarah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
That's it. Yes,
sorry.
Fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the report that covers children's complaints to children's services and the related feedback between April 2019 and March 2020. I just thought if I can just briefly highlight a few points or key issues in the report, and then I'm happy to take questions. Generally in the year, slightly fewer complaints, but still within the sort of region that we'd expect, and the distribution between the different stages of the complaints procedure remains very much the same, including referrals to the Ombudsman. So it's consistent with previous years. Complaints to the non-social care services, such as special educational needs, educational psychology, they remain consistent, as do the majority of the complaints to children's social care. But the point that I've made in the report is there has been a noticeable increase in complaints to the duty team. We have looked into this. I've discussed it with the director and head of service. We can't identify a cause. The spread of complaints over the year, the 4 quarters, is the same. So it's not in relation to a particular event or specific time, but we are going to continue to monitor it, and particularly in light of the new service structure that came in at the end of June, because there's the new triage team. So we'll look at that quite carefully to see if there's any particular issues around what we call the front door. Just in the report, to help sort of understanding the type of complaints we get, I've illustrated some of the key areas where we get complaints. The issue of attitude and behaviour of staff comes up a lot. I have to use the category headings in the statutory guidance for complaints. So I use the examples to sort of illustrate what that might mean in practice. We're looking into, we're trialling some work to break down sort of the reason for complaints being made in the first place into smaller categories, so that we can identify any particular teams or service areas that have a problem, or there's any emerging problems with the way that services are being delivered. And you know, if that sort of is helpful, I will include it in next year's report. We place a lot of emphasis now on the learning from complaints, both to sort of build into service improvement and to prevent repeat complaints in the same area. I provide a regular report to the Service Improvement and Ofsted Preparation Board on complaints received. And I've particularly sort of highlighted some of the lessons learned from the stage 2 investigations. They're very detailed investigations into complaints, can result in quite lengthy reports. So we take quite a lot of learning from those, and we've got quite a robust system in place now to pick up on the learning and feed that back through service improvement, through the management meetings, and are keen to know that we can evidence the change, not just identify what needs to change, but we are a lot better at evidencing the changes that have been made. I've included examples of cases to the Ombudsman. We had 8 cases to the Ombudsman, only 1 was upheld. We see this as a good outcome, which I would hope is indicating we're dealing with the complaints appropriately through the process. Nationally, the Ombudsman reports 61% of complaints are upheld, so we have quite a low figure. I've also included in some detail some quite positive feedback through the compliments, because I think some of them are really lovely, and it shows that although we concentrate on the complaints, we do also get the positive feedback, and that helps us learn as well about what works well and what works not so well. Timescales, I mean, we recognise that this is an issue, and we don't always manage to provide the response within the timescale. Something we're always working on. I've discussed it with the senior leadership team. We're working with managers to remind them of the requirements of the regulations, but also the support available to them to respond to complaints, some of which are quite complex. So, you know, we do encourage them to talk to us in the complaints team. We can help with responses. And then just to conclude the report, I've written a bit about the work we will do over the coming year to develop our work. I think we're in a good place at the moment to build on areas that we know need further work, but we've sort of got a plan for doing that. So that's my very quick run through, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a difficult paper, this, because first off, it shouldn't be lost that there is positive feedback. And I see that the paper identifies 53 compliments were recorded, and that's to be commended. But when it comes down to complaints themselves, it's a concern that when they're reviewed, and I see that the attitude of behaviour of staff, and once the complaint's been registered and it's remedied by somebody saying, well, yes, I'll change my ways, it's a pity that that happens at the outset. And when it goes through to stage 3 review of the panel, there were 5 requests for stage 3. 3 of these were not pursued by the complainant. It's probably too onerous, where they get tired of actually, you know, they've been through what is now become the 3rd phase of the process to try and rectify their concerns. And against this, we can't just look at this and think, well, these are the amount of complaints that we have, because we can identify the complementary element of it, which is, as I say, to be commended. But most people don't complain, they put up with it. You can burn somebody's house down and they won't complain. So, you know, it's not, on the face of it, it's much more complex than it presents itself as. But it is a concern that when you've got the category that the attitude of behaviour of staff, it's 33% of complaints are in that vein. And I think that that's something that some attention could be given to try and alleviate that, because that should never happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a difficult area, the attitude and behaviour of staff, because it is quite a high proportion. We are in the team, we're working hard to really, and I'm thinking probably since the figures for this report were done, we're working hard to break down whether or not, so a complainant might say it's the attitude or behaviour of staff, but are they actually complaining about that, or the message that is being delivered to them? And they will often, you know, blame the messenger, really, and see them as the you know, the problem in the case, as opposed to it's actually what the message that is having to be given to them. So we are looking very carefully when we log them at whether or not it is that, or if the actual complaint behind it is about what's happening with their family. But having said that, I think you have to acknowledge there are occasional complaints where it clearly is the attitude and behaviour of staff, and managers do have to address that with the staff, which is where I think some of our learning comes in around specific training for staff, or for you know, teams as a whole, in the way the service is delivered. But you know, I think it is difficult in the area that we're talking about. There will always be a difficult relationship between the social worker and the service users.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate it's a difficult one, because, of course, people are venting a frustration, and how you interpret that in frustration, it's very difficult. And yes, you've got an awkward job there, Sarah. Liz.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
You've answered many of my questions, so thank you for that. And I think echoing what Vic has said, it's really good. The number of compliments has increased. And what you pointed out, the fact that you're going to have smaller categories, so you're going to be able to identify areas, and maybe teams in particular, where complaints are coming in perhaps more than other areas. I think that's a really good step forward. But the question I'd like to ask, I mean, our figures were very similar each year. They were similar last year and the year before. And I just wonder, how are we performing in respect to other authorities, in the number of complaints we get, the time taken to respond to them, the issues they highlight, good or bad when we compare ourselves with other authorities, because I think it might give us an insight as to how well we're doing, perhaps overall, rather than we say, well, we need to improve, which yes, we do need to, but it may be, I mean, it is a very contentious area. You're dealing with some very unhappy people and some very unhappy decisions, that have been made, for them. So I just wondered, had you maybe perhaps next time round we could have an overall view on that?
Yes, I mean, in terms of comparisons and benchmarking with other authorities, there is no requirement for us to have a performance indicator for complaints. There is in the health service, there isn't in social care, and it is a conversation. I'm part of the National Complaints Managers Group, and it is a conversation we've had with the Department of Health around whether or not that would be brought in for social care, because although it's Department of Health, they oversee both the children's and adults' complaints procedures. And that was something that was being looked at, I have to say, before Brexit happened, and then we were told that there wouldn't be time to develop anything. I'm also part of the regional groups. We do look at setting up some local benchmarking. It's something that people are interested in. I understand there are some councils that aren't keen for that information to be shared in a comparator sort of way. We all have to publish our annual reports, and that's one of the ways that we can look at it, is to look at other annual reports, and we can certainly do that. But I think there were some councils didn't want it sort of in a table showing performance, but we did do it once. I have to say it is a few years ago, but I think as an authority, we sat very much in the middle, which I think is not a bad place to be, in that we didn't have an outlier number of particularly either way, low or high complaints, and our response times were in line, probably slightly better than other authorities. So I don't think that we are performing badly, but obviously that's not current, and I'm quite happy to try and have a look at sort of comparator authorities to see how we compare with them for those kind of areas, and try and include that in next year's report. The other place that we can look is the Ombudsman's getting a lot better at making their data available to us, and they actually have an interactive map on the Ombudsman's website, and you can go on and click on different authorities and see the numbers of complaints from those authorities. And I think certainly as an authority overall, our complaints to the Ombudsman are so probably in line with in terms of numbers, but the numbers upheld are not high compared to other authorities, which is positive. So, and I don't think we'll ever prevent the complaints coming in, but I think the important thing for us is that we deal with them well when we do receive them, so that they don't need to escalate. And Vic was mentioning about the stage 3s, and some people drop off at that point. I think the children's procedure is a long-winded procedure, and as a group we've lobbied for it to be made shorter, so that people don't feel that they're jumping through hoops really to get to the end of that process. I think there's lots of reasons why people do drop out. Sometimes hopefully it's because they feel their complaint's been resolved, but I think there is an issue about the length of time it takes to complete the process. But unfortunately we are where we are with regulations at the moment.
Paul.
Chair, thank you. I just want to say, as a councillor, I look at this report and I say, is the system working? And I think the big answer that I've got is yes, it is. And it's a really good system. I feel assured from having this report today. And I think it's also important, with all the pressures there are at the moment, that we as a committee feed back our congratulations to the officers for the hard work that they're putting in, because I think this is an opportunity where you can say we've got a good system and we've got good staff that are operating that system, and I think we should actually say that, because I think it is important on us to do that. Thank you, Chair.
I don't have any more speakers, so I'm going to say now that first off, Sarah, it takes a lot of enthusiasm for somebody to write a complimentary note. They must be very enthusiastic about the service they received to go through that exercise. So if you've had 53 compliments about the service, I think that's to be commended. I want us to be able to be open enough to receive complaints. So I don't mind too much if we get a whole host of complaints about on the first series of the process, because it keeps the discipline there. And as I said before, a lot of people will just put up with things and won't say anything. And if they won't report a complaint because they feel it's too onerous or they're intimidated. And we should never be in a position where we present ourselves in that vein. What I don't want to see is escalations to stage 2 and stage 3, because that means that there is a problem. And we don't have a great deal of those fortunately. And so that's, again, commendable to the service that we're actually delivering. So I reiterate the points that Paul made, that it's a damn good and encouraging paper. So I hope that meets with the satisfaction of the panel. I'll just get a judgment overall as people agreeing with that. I don't see any dissenters. Actually, some hands up. Thank you very much. Right. So thank you very much, Sarah, for doing, and you're doing a very difficult job to good effect. So thank you.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
So can we move on now to item 9, the Music Hub, and if I can invite Chris Wilford to present the report, please. Chris.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, councillors. Can I just, I'll just also mention, I think I've missed Sarah, she's left. I just wanted to say what a sterling job Sarah and the team do in terms of supporting officers. I think they do a great job. She's gone, but I think you captured that in the report she just gave you. So thank you for your time. So I presented a paper on the music service. On the line, I should also have my colleague Tim Parker. Do you want to introduce yourself, please, Tim?
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors and other colleagues. I realised that the wording on my little Zoom window said Music Hub, and that's probably not the most useful thing. My name's Tim Parker. I'm one of the interim co-managers of the music service since the 1st of October last year, and have been working with Chris and Margaret prior to Chris, looking at how we move the music service forward.
Great, thank you, Tim. So Tim's here to help out with any clarity or provide any additional information about the music service you might have with regards to the report. I won't go through point by point with the report, but what I'll do is kind of sketch the framework of the information I've provided. So the music service in Baines is a local authority delivered service, but it is a Arts Council funded service. The music service is the prime lead for the delivery of the Music Education Hub in Baines, which is responsible for delivering the music education plan by the Arts Council. So we've got some responsibilities to make sure that we deliver a national plan in the area. The service itself employs a number of staff, both within the council to help deliver the service. So Tim and Estelle, who's not on the call today, are currently interim managers of the service. But we also have a number of peripatetic tutors who deliver some of the lessons and support to children and young people in the local area. We also have a number of administrative and business staff who also support the delivery of the service. There's also a steering group which helps oversee the service and deliver some of the strategic priorities and provide support about the direction of the music service. And together they make up the delivery of the Music Education Hub in Baines. There's two parts to the report, really. The first one is to do an update on the progress of the music service following an external consultant's report which was commissioned by the Arts Council, which provided an overview of the current delivery and direction of the music service. And the other part of the report is just to provide some information about how the music service managed to deliver during lockdown, because obviously that had a significant impact on the ability of the service to continue to do what it was doing. So the report itself deals with some of the issues which arose after the Arts Council commissioned a report in May 29 last year, which was finally delivered in October 2019. The report itself has recommended a number of changes for the Baines music service it needed to make. Fundamentally, what the Arts Council would like to see is that the music service is operating more strategically, and more of the Arts Council grant is being used to deliver some of that strategy and less to deliver some more of the music service. The Arts Council put a time scale on how they'd like to see some of these changes be delivered. They wanted to see an improvement plan by September 2020. And they also paired us up with Wiltshire Music Service to provide support over that period on the progression of the service. So the report itself, it kind of tries to bring you up to date with how that change and that progress is going so far. It's obviously been impacted by COVID-19, but during that time we've had opportunity to deliver a lot of change within the music service, both on how the music service is delivered, but also how we are able to free up resources to do more of the strategic work that the Arts Council would like to see. Since that report, the Arts Council has also commissioned another consultant, the same firm of consultants who are AP Benson, to look at the progress that we're making. We have provided the Arts Council with a lot of information, which has gone to the steering group about how the service will evolve and change, and how it will continue to evolve and change and deliver a service to meet the outcomes that the Arts Council found in its first report. That report hasn't been received yet. I kind of hoped that in between the presentation of this paper to the September meeting, which it didn't take, and this meeting, we might have had that. We haven't had that report yet. We're still waiting on it. It feels like that will be quite a key report for the service area. So I spoke to the Arts Council recently, and I believe we can expect that report in the next 4 weeks. It feels like that will be something that we will need to discuss further, both internally, but potentially also at future scrutiny meetings. So I just wanted to highlight that the music service is still going through quite a significant period of change. What I would like to say is I genuinely believe that the music service is on the right direction. The staff that are involved in it, I think, have done an absolutely fantastic job to balance two things. One, to deliver the change that the Arts Council has required, but also two, to keep the show on the road during COVID-19. And during COVID, the staff in the service worked tirelessly to make sure that children and young people could still have access to music, which I think was really important for children to have when we were unable to go into their schools and perhaps access much external support or services. So that's kind of the report in a nutshell. I've got Tim here on the line as well, who will be, he's introduced himself, he'll be able to support with answering some of the questions, but also give an additional flavour about the types of things that the service did during lockdown. So I will stop there and hand over to yourselves.
Thank you, Chris. Can I take Michelle first, please?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the report. I've got two questions. My first one is the Music Hub financially self-sufficient? And my second question is about the ongoing impact of COVID, and has there been any thought about how how music lessons will be delivered in the long term if this
Chair, I can't hear what Michelle's saying, sorry.
Can you not hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
not very clear.
Listen hard, Paul.
I'm trying to.
Can
I mean, I heard Michelle. I can feed that back. So can you hear me, Paul?
Yes, I can. Yeah, clearly.
Yeah. So Michelle asked the first question about whether the music hub was financially self-sufficient, and the second question was how is the music service going to continue to deliver if COVID-19 becomes a long-term issue in terms of how it will impact on the music service. Is that correct, Michelle?
Yes, thank you. You said it much better than me. Thank you.
So the first thing about the music service being financially sufficient. So I mean, that's kind of one of the big drivers behind the ACE report, which was making sure that the service was able to stand on its own 2 feet financially and be able to deliver 2 things. One, the strategic bit of what we need to do to deliver the music education plan, but also support the structures behind that, the staffing, things like that, which are needed to deliver some of that plan. And that has been a big part of Tim Estelle and Nick Howdell's work from Wiltshire, is to deliver a budget that works. I think we've done that. We've presented a financial budget to the last steering group, which met earlier this month. It's a budget that's still to be tested out, and obviously we're still living within COVID, and COVID has a significant impact on music education hubs across the country. And I believe part of the reason that we haven't received the report from ACE is that the organisation who are reviewing it are also looking at supporting a wide range of music hubs across the country as they try and come to terms with how they deliver in what is a very different environment. So to summarise is, yes, I believe we've got a budget now which delivers both what the Arts Council want, but also makes the music service sufficient. I'll just stop at that bit, just check if Tim wants to add anything additional to the budget question.
Not especially, other than to agree with what Chris has said. One of the biggest pieces of work that we did initially in October, when we received the AP Benson report, and Estelle and I and Nick had sight of that report, was to look at how we were operating as a music service and where the spend was being placed. We operate under something called the National Plan for Music Education, which requires us to look at 4 core roles and 3 extension roles, and we looked at where the money was being spent across those 7 responsibilities, those funding responsibilities that we had. And I just echo what Chris has said, which is that I think we've now got a budget that meets the needs of the national plan, that has shifted quite a substantial amount of the funding into the wider areas of the national plan that the AP Benson report felt that we were lacking, and that we are still looking to see how COVID has a continual effect over the next 5 months or so to the year end, when obviously we'll be able to see how that budget stacks up against what we're presented with as an ongoing picture.
Thank you. Liz.
Sorry, I was just going to...
go on.
I was just going to answer the second part of...
okay, Chris, sorry, I beg your pardon.
That's okay. So just to add as well is the budget that we presented and the service we're working up is something that we hope at some point will be fully tested out in non-COVID circumstances, but we completely understand that at the moment we have to live with it, COVID. And I think the service has adapted wonderfully to what lockdown, and delivered over 400 lessons online. What the service is doing now is trying to work out how it can work in a very safe way to deliver music in a way which is more akin to how it was done previously, so more face-to-face. How can we work in the community? And a lot of that work has to be delivered by delivered through national legislation. So the government guidelines are essential for us to be able to decide how we can deliver tuition safely. We've done a lot of work with schools about how we get back into schools, particularly around creating risk assessments. I'll let Tim jump in there, because he's been living and breathing that bit of the work for the last few months.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for the question about that, because it's an opportunity for the panel to hear some good news and some kind of positive going forward. I'd also like to acknowledge to the panel the way that we've been supported by both the Health and Safety Department and Public Health, as well as Chris and the wider Directorate. Before the summer educational break, we contacted all of our schools to gauge their first reactions as to how they felt they would like music in their school or not, as the case may be, when we got back to the academic year that we've just started. Estelle and I were sort of on tenterhooks across the summer period because the Department of Education, alongside the DCMS, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, commissioned a report into this issue of aerosol emissions. So this is from woodwind and brass and singers. I'm a singer by training, and that report was released on the 28th of August at 7:30, so the Friday night before the bank holiday, before schools went back. And so Estelle and I put a huge amount of work corresponding with schools, working with our tutors, our peripatetic tutors, to look at how we safely put face-to-face tuition in where schools were happy for that model to be put back in. We produced floor plans and risk assessments for every single instrument and every single variation of room space and room size. And that was something that Health and Safety and the public health teams assisted us with. They were sent to all schools, and we also did a piece of work where we got all of the risk assessments that schools had to put in place, and we lined them up against ours, and we communicated those to all of our peripatetic teachers so that they felt that they were both going in safely, that schools understood that we were going in safely, and the kind of control measures that we were going to put in place with things like social distancing and direction of how the students and the staff were facing, ventilation, the size of the rooms. And that's been an enormous piece of work that we started before schools went back. That work is, to say ongoing, I think is reasonable, because we have updates from DfE and we have to respond to those. The really good news is that the figures of pupils that we were teaching during lockdown in terms 5 and 6, the old summer term, we've more than doubled the applications and doubled the number of pupils that wanted tuition. And we have now sort of a mixed economy. We have our tutors going into schools to deliver face-to-face where the space and the school is happy for that to take place, and we are happy. But also we've got online delivery taking place within the same school setting. So we can have some teachers delivering face-to-face in some schools and online in other schools. We've got whole class tuition going on, some face-to-face and some online. So we've got one of our tutors is actually delivering to whole classes in one of our primary settings, where she's at home delivering to a whole class in the school. And actually, as much as COVID presented an enormous challenge to us, huge challenge to all of us, actually we've seen that out of our response and our reaction to that, it's opened up huge opportunities that perhaps we had not anticipated. And the potential to work with a greater range of young people in a greater range of settings, some in those vulnerable settings, some with our virtual schools, for instance, has presented a real opportunity for the music service not only to continue what it was already doing, but to actually widen that footprint within the local authority. And it's a very exciting period for Estelle and I to look at actually being a bigger and a more diverse deliverer to young people because of our response and how we've had to react to the COVID pandemic.
Okay, thank you. Liz.
Hi, I'm really pleased to hear that recent piece that you were talking about, that the good news of providing music to a more diverse group, because what really worried me 2 budgets ago under the previous administration in Baines, £40,000 was cut from the music budget and the music service. And really it was understood that it was only because of the Arts Council England grant really actually kept the music service going within Baines. And obviously some of that money has been used rather than in a strategic way, as Arts Council England have stated in their report, but you know, to keep the music service going. So so I have 2 questions really, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to reassure me about this. Firstly, you're reassuring me in one way that the music service is more diverse now, but my worry is that you've cut it to the core. You've had to do that because £40,000 went from the music budget 2 budgets ago. So how are you possibly able to offer music to the whole range of pupils who wish to avail of it? I mean, is it tuition only for those who can pay? And that's what I believe is happening to our music service at the moment. So you may be able to do these whole school sessions, which is excellent, but for the youngsters who wish to learn, who can't afford to pay for it, what's happening about those? And secondly, I wonder, to what extent is the Wiltshire Music Hub helping out with Baines in helping out with the music service overall? So it's not to take away the wonderful work you did over COVID, but I'm just worried about the future of our music service in Baines.
Chris, do you want me to respond to that, or do you want to go first?
I'll take the first thing around the budget. I believe a couple of scrutinies ago, that question around the budget was taken, and a decision was made to the panel to take that back to the council at the time, and that budget wasn't taken from the music service. So there hasn't been a cut from the grant to the music service. Certainly that's not, when we look at the budget, it's something that we have been forecasting or looking at. So I'll take that bit on that. Can you just remind me, Liz, just quickly the second and third bits of that question?
I'm just worried about, well, I will query what you said, because I in the budget 2 years ago, £40,000 was taken from the music service, and we objected in council as well, a number of us, and it did happen. So I really would like you to check that one for me.
Yeah, I can do.
As an output from the minutes, a follow-on thing from the minutes. I am worried that tuition for youngsters is only, music tuition is only available for those who can pay. So if you can't pay, you don't get music tuition. And the last bit was, Wiltshire is involved with our music hub. So I just wonder, to what extent are we reliant on Wiltshire putting money in to keep our music going in Baines?
So I'll let Tim take the bit around the music offer for those individuals who can't pay. What I will say, I'll take the Wiltshire bit. So Wiltshire provides support through Nick Howdell, who's the lead. He's the manager of the music service in Wiltshire. That support was put in by the Arts Council, and we. I have to say, I think it's been greatly beneficial. I think Nick's experience has been really valuable at this time, and I think Nick's been consummately professional about how he's delivered some of the support that we've got from him at the moment. That support isn't ongoing forever, but it is essential at this moment in time for us to be able to deliver some of the changes. And at the moment, that role with Wiltshire is only purely based for help us to deliver the changes which have been prescribed by the Arts Council. I will let Tim pick up the question in relation to access to music lessons for all.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Helpman. This is something that Estelle and I feel incredibly strongly about, that tuition should be available in a much, much wider way than it possibly was before. You're right in saying that we need to be very cautious that tuition is only available for those for whom they have the financial wherewithal to pay for it. One of the pieces of work that we have done since October is to look at how we are spending both our time and our money. And one of the biggest changes we have made is to free up a huge amount of, as it were, the backroom time, a huge amount of the administration time, which was being used in essence the funding for that was coming from the Arts Council grant, but also we've been able to free up cash to revisit our remissions so that we can look at supporting those students for whom they don't have the financial support to have lessons. So Estelle and I are actually, we started looking at that sort of in anger in the last couple of weeks to make sure that our remissions policy is fit for purpose going forward. The issue about freeing up time means that we can put work into delivery into schools, and we can commission work from both within the music service and externally to work with some of those young people, or as many of those young people as possible, for whom funding and finances is not available. So the model that the music service was delivering of paid tuition, that still exists. The model of paid membership to ensembles still exists, but we are now able to look much more widely at how we use some of the money and or the money and the time that we've freed up to support those people for whom funding finance is not an option.
Thank you, Tim. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I don't normally disagree with Liz, but I think making politics of the music service is really quite unfortunate. The one thing, and seeing Chris Batten and Kevin from the past, the one thing about Avon County that was really respected was the music service. And I think the music service is really important to young people. I remember when I was a child, there was no music service, and I've regretted that all my life. And the one question I wanted to ask Chris is this a statutory function of the local authority or not? And is it under threat at all? Probably a question for Kevin, in terms of the reviews that are having to take place around budgets going forward, because I think I would like to suggest a change to the recommendations, possibly a 2-4, Vic, where we actually say as a committee that we fully support the music service, because I think it's important as a committee we actually do say that, because I think it's around the organisation of it, but I do think we actually ought to say, actually, this is really good and it's really useful for young people. So I'm sorry if I've gone political, Liz, but I think that we're all here wanting the music service to continue in the best way possible for young people.
Right, well, I'm going to say now that I would persuade us again in any guise whatsoever of getting political on this panel, and it's something I've always tried to steer away from, and it's very easy to try and follow into that if you can try to emphasize your point of view. But if we could be persuaded away from that, I would appreciate that.
I think this one, Vic, on behalf of Chris, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to put it across to you now, Kevin.
Oh, brilliant. Yes, so yeah, it's a good point, Liz. I think you were spot on about the reductions 2 years ago with regards to the budget, but I believe when we came in May, that was something we spotted very quickly. One of the backbenchers picked that up, and we didn't implement that cut from that particular budget. So I think Chris is correct in what he says, that cut wasn't put in, and we didn't make any reductions there. I fully agree with
well done, Kevin.
I fully agree with what Paul's just said. I massively support the music services, and I wish I had a free music service when I was young, and I definitely didn't. So under this administration, I can guarantee you, Liz, that there will be no reductions to the music service, and it will only be enhanced if possible.
Okay, I don't see any more speakers. I was deprived of any music tuition myself. My father sang in the parochial male voice choir, and I can't I can't sing a note. So there you go.
May I say something, please? May I say
yes.
something?
Go on then, Liz.
I did actually ask to speak again because I wasn't trying to make political points. And I very much bitterly kind of resent people saying that about me. We're here to do the best for the young people, adults as well, but we're talking about young people here, that we are representing. And
Chair,
it has
I'm happy
come to me.
to apologise.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay, and my real point here, the music service is fantastic. It is wonderful, and what we do in Baines is kind of praised throughout the area, and we know it's good. But my concern is that a lot of money was taken away from it. I'm really pleased to hear it wasn't, and it's still there. But it does mean that some children are disadvantaged, and that's where I come from. If that's political, fair enough. But I'm really here to make sure that, I speak for those children who are disadvantaged. And Tim, nice to see you again, because I know Tim from years ago. It's really good to see how passionate you are about trying to make sure that disadvantaged children aren't disadvantaged and they are given opportunities. So, I'm not making cheap political points. What I'm trying to do is scrutinise and challenge. Okay, and I'm really pleased to hear disadvantaged children, are going to be looked after. Thank you.
Thank you,
Liz. I fully appreciate your commitment. You're a good egg, but sometimes it can be misinterpreted. So if we can, all the panel can be persuaded not to try and get political, I would appreciate that. And there was no intent there. I can accept that, Liz. So please don't be offended. And what I will say in closing this is we've got a number of recommendations. We can take them as read, and it seems that the panel would like a further recommendation to fully support the music service there. As a panel, we do fully support. And certainly you've demonstrated in the face of adversity.
Chair,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I think Councillor Malloy would like to speak on this.
All right, I don't seem to have her there. Oh, I do, yes. Ruth,
yeah.
I do apologise.
So, sorry, I just wanted to say I didn't think that Councillor Harben was being political, just for the record, but I also agree it would be good to add an extra point to the recommendation and perhaps somehow in the wording include something that we support it in principle, and we also encourage where possible to widen the offer to all children, and that would be up to the music service to work out how, and I'm sure you're doing it already, but to fully consider the children who are disadvantaged and try and offer them as much as possible. So if you could, something in the wording a bit more elegant than that. Thank you.
No, but in Basin, we'll leave this to Mark to make it more elaborate. But we fully support the music service, and we would like to fully consider those more disadvantaged children in being exposed to music tuition. Something like that. And Mark can make that coherent. Okay, but look, Chris and Tim, you're doing an excellent job, and that's all too evident, and that's been reflected in the fact that you're taking it upon yourselves without being prompted by this panel to reach out to those disadvantaged kids so that they get an opportunity that some of us older ones here have been denied. Okay, so thank you both very much. So we move on now to item 10, director's briefing. And again, we've got that's been submitted as a paper for us to reflect on. Does that instigate any questions or comments from the panel, please? Nobody's signified, give me chosen any over there.
Okay.
Kevin's waving his hand.
Right, Kevin, come in, please.
Sorry, I was trying to operate a mute button and typed
That's
as
why I
well.
was giving it a little bit of time. We've all been there.
Yeah. Sorry. So, Vic, there's sort of two director updates. One from Leslie, I think, and whether from Dr. Lawrence. Is that right?
You've got public health update as well.
Okay, but is this for both or just for Leslie?
You choose what you want to. We'll take
okay.
both papers together.
Okay, fantastic. If the one about adult social care, Leslie, just interested in what the local winter plan key points will cover on that one, and a list of concerns around visiting elderly relatives and testing in care homes, and admissions COVID free and things. Is that sort of part of all that winter plan as well?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Kevin. So yes, that's exactly part of the government winter plan. We're looking at our response now to the government's request to develop a winter plan. And in fact, I'll be starting to write that already. The local government association have sent out a very helpful Excel spreadsheet that we are using as a tick box, because there's something like 125 recommendations and points that we need to address. They've split those points into 4 themes, which we're working to. And most of those, as you'd expect, would be what is our response to support provider organisations, what's our response to support the workforce, and what's our response to support people and families, and what is our mechanisms for going about doing that. So we've gone through and looked at all of those 125 points, and in the main, we are in, I would say, a good position. We're rating ourselves as green on those. There are some areas where we think we need to do some more work, and part of that would involve getting some assurance that everybody is working in a way that complies with the ethical framework that the government sent out back in March. It is a framework that ensures that we comply with the Care Act, and whilst everybody's endeavouring to do that, we would just feel like we would need some more assurance on that. And then as well, if I'm honest, we need to do more around the term of working together to develop those services around how they're responding to COVID. Now, the partnership working that's taken place during the COVID period has been remarkable, I would say. Certainly, I can only speak for Bath and North East Somerset, but we have worked very closely with our CCG colleagues and our third sector group, and with Virgin Care and AWP and the RUH. We've all worked. I'm sorry if I've missed anybody out in that, because certainly it's not my intention. Everybody's worked very collectively. They've worked collectively well and in a very supportive manner. But in terms of engaging people with lived experience, that's part of the winter plan that we're supposed to be. We need to do a little bit more work on, if I'm honest. So we are going to make take more actions in order to do that, and that will be one of the areas of focus in our plan. But of course, we have a number of provider organisations, as you'd expect, such as Virgin Care, who have a citizens panel that meet frequently. Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership Trust also have a service user panel that also meet frequently. So we're not planning to reinvent or create something new for that, because that wouldn't be a sensible thing to do. But we are just going to look at developing our mechanisms around that. So there's kind of 2 main areas of focus, if I'm honest. One is around the ethical framework we want assurance on, and the other is around making sure we get the voice of people with lived experience.
Okay, thanks, Les. Are there any more speakers? I'm not picking anybody up, so it seems.
Vic, could I do the second bit on the Dr. Lawrence, or is that nobody here to pick?
Yes, quite so, yeah.
Okay, sorry. It's just to look at the saying about the test and trace will never catch up. He said in his report, and I just wondered what our local MPs have to say about that, and whether we or the councillors are able to do anything about the limited resources and the lack of testing and tracing.
Jess, I'm going to bring you in quickly.
It was a question on a separate issue. Is that all right?
Yeah, you come on. I'm not ignoring you, Kevin, but we'll come back to that and sum it up.
All right. It was also linked to Dr. Lawrence's update. It was just to ask if at the next meeting we could make a request for any information on the uptake of the seasonal flu vaccination in schools as well as in the wider population. Would that be okay?
Right, yes, we'll put that as a specific question. Normally, we only get a written update from Public Health, where we've revised our process, or procedures rather. But perhaps Kevin can bring that, report on that when he does his cabinet member update. Okay.
Or Rob.
Or Rob. We can choose between them who's appropriate enough to give a qualified answer on that. Kevin, I'm going to ask you to remind me your second point again, please.
Yes, it was regarding the, sorry, just put my paper aside. Dr. Lawrence mentioned that the test and trace in his report will never catch up. I was wondering what we could do to see or get information or work with the local MPs about the limited resources and the lack of testing and tracing.
Of course, it is a national issue, so...
It certainly is, but obviously every area, the more people can say and explain the difficulties, then it especially from people like Dr. Lawrence, it really helps.
Right. Would the panel wish that we write as a panel to our two respective MPs expressing those concerns? That I can see some nodding heads in favour of that. Just a quick show of hands, please, if you favour it. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it looks like, yes, there's certainly enough to form a majority on that. So we'll write to our respective MPs expressing those concerns. And my response to the two reports here is that certainly Baines has been exemplary in working together with its partners in dealing with the COVID issue. And that's reflected why we were at one time the least exposed authority in the country to COVID. We're climbing gradually. We were 5th, and I believe at the currently we're about 9th lowest exposure. So where Baines and all the respective agencies working together have done an absolutely magnificent job in the challenge of COVID. Also, I think we should congratulate the residents of Baines in their response, because they've behaved in an exemplary manner and taken the government guidance seriously, and that's why we are so low. One of the things that in Bruce Lawrence's report is that he actually identifies the problems that the huge increase in numbers that we've been subject to is because of the conduct of the students, and it's something that nobody politically wants to say, but he said it in this thing, and it's a cold fact, and the public at large realise that. So I think that, the recognition that he's actually been accurate in determining where the problems, the underlying problems exist, he's not evaded that point. So I don't know if I'm being too outrageous in saying that, but it is a cold fact, I'm afraid. So are there any more comments that anyone would make on those two papers, or do we accept them as read? It looks like we accept them as read. So we work on to go on to now to item 11, the panel work plan. Now we've got that what's provisionally put in for our next meeting in November. So at the moment we've got the school performance narrowing the gap, and then we've got an acronym that I don't understand after that says SACRA. We've got the Independence Reviewing Service Annual Report, Youth Parliament Updates, and Youth Justice Plan. All right, the Youth Justice Plan I know will have to come to us because that's a procedural point. It's a statutory requirement that we get to see it. You will understand the difficulty that the officers, together with Michelle and myself, get in trying to formulate these agendas, because we've now been over 2 hours on an extraordinary meeting to complete our last agenda that went over there. So it's quite difficult. And we've had no cabinet member reports on this in this instance. But the debate's been good, and the points made with some poignancy, and it was all important. So I thank you all for for your contributions and your commitment to this panel. I'm really pleased we got a really good panel here, and it's challenging, and I congratulate all of you in the contributions that you make, and I'm grateful for that. Is there anything that anybody'd like to make by point on the work plan projection forward? And please don't be inhibited by the fact that I've said it's very difficult. We'll have to work around that. Kevin.
Yes, thanks, Vic. I think it might just be for cabinet members' reports, possibly. I don't know, rather than any sort of big papers. But looking at my notes, there was something about updates on the future of the Culverhay site that were going to be done regularly through the years,
Right.
and then looked after children and exploitation risks, and an autism board report.
Okay. So Mark, you're recording those. Liz? Can't hear you. Can you start again, Liz, please? Still can't hear you, Liz.
Yeah, I hope
There you go, we can hear you. Could you start again, please? We never heard anything from
food poverty, the food poverty steering group. I think we were promised that we might get a report within the next couple of months. I know one was supposed to go to council in November and is going to January. So perhaps we could ask for this, for us to get one as our PDS panel in January, perhaps.
Right, we'll try and get one before it goes to council, because it's something of a nonsense if it goes to the council and then comes back to us.
Absolutely.
We need to be before it. But we'll take all these into account, and then we may not be able to include all of what you're putting forward, but certainly we can put it projecting forward. But it's to see what we can accommodate, else it gets too onerous. Okay, anything more from anybody? I can't see anybody signaling. Yes,
I asked to speak. I don't know, is Kevin still here with us?
Yes.
Kevin, I asked a question at the start about Mr. Bowden leaving the director's job, and you mentioned about a structural review. Bearing in mind that we're talking here about children and adults, and it's a major part of the council's budgets, will we be given a chance to scrutinise and make comment about that in terms of the services that are being provided to children and adults? I'm more than happy if you don't want to answer it now and to give me a reply separately.
It's a very good question. I think the group leaders panel will be given that opportunity, Paul. I think that's the group it's going to. I don't know whether that's a satisfactory answer, but I think that's the official.
I don't think it's within the remit of this panel to start into the structural arrangements of the council. We have to go with and accept what's been determined elsewhere.
Thank you. That's two apologies in one meeting.
But I am happy, Chair, to have a word with Paul after this meeting at some point to discuss his concerns. Yes.
And
thank you, Chair.
What happens, which is immediate to this panel, you can give by way of your cabinet member update, Kevin. Okay. I don't see any more. No more panel members trying to get attention. So I think before Paul has to do a third apology, I think we're bringing the meeting to a close. And thank you all very much for your attendance. Thank you all very